to Musical Orbits webinar on being a principal player with Louisa Tuck. Hi, Louisa. Louisa she's the principal cellist of the Royal Northern Sinfonia, which is based in Newcastle in the UK. And we've already got a question here for you, Louisa, before we can start. From Pam, who leads an orchestra, an amateur orchestra, and she says that certain of her sections frequently play slightly behind everyone else, and she wants to hear your reasons, what you think the reasons this happens, and how she might work on it over time with them. So she's played chamber music with them to see if it helps and to try and work on it, but it's still a problem. She asks if everybody tries to lead together rather than leading and following, and it works for a few bars and then it tails off. What's your theory on that?
Well, I think the interesting thing about orchestras is that everyone's playing the same part. You have a section, and obviously there are problems with ensemble in that. So if things are slowing down, it has to not just come from one person. I mean, yeah, you have a principal and you have co-principal and people behind, but everybody needs to be a team player. And so if you have certain moments where you know that the people at the back of the section can move things on, maybe that would be a start with that. But if you think different sections are slowing down, was that what the question said? Is it about different sections playing at different times?
That's right. Generally, the other sections,
yeah,
and the sections themselves, of course.
Yeah, I mean, as a cello section, I think you always have to have drive and interest in rhythm, and always that things should come from the bass line anyway, direction. So whether it's a case of that people aren't always aware of it, and maybe you can change things in what you're actually doing to make things maybe more interesting for people to listen to, so they were able to go with it rather than just consistently just ploughing on all the time and trying to maintain rhythm that way. But I think that we are lucky with bass lines in that way, that you can make things interesting that people have to listen to and react to, that you can't always go with the tune. So, and also people who play the tune, sometimes it's that there's so much self-enjoyment in playing a nice tune that sometimes things are a little bit blinkered, perhaps.
It is true. It is true.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
We get carried away sometimes, don't we? And
yeah, sometimes.
But if you've got a principal cellist who maybe isn't the most forthright and doesn't quite, I mean, you're a very forthright principal. It's great playing with you. I mean, you have to go with Louisa when you're in an orchestra with her. And I love that about your playing. But not everybody is that forthright. How can you encourage them to take the lead over the leader, maybe even?
Well, you would never want to stamp on what a leader has, but you can encourage them. I don't know, with the type of player I am, I am forthright, and I'm very enthusiastic is a good word. But I think just trying to engage people, whether it's visually, eye contact, or perhaps sometimes playing a little bit more than you would need to, dynamically, and showing with body language. It's not always about one person leading or everybody trying to lead together, because everyone breathes differently. And actually, that's a big point, actually, and making sure everyone is breathing. I mean, we don't have that thing that woodwind players need to, so they automatically have an advantage over us string players. But I think making sure that everyone is doing the same phrasing within a section will make people breathe in the same kind of way, and that can probably help with drive and moving things along, maybe.
What do you think about in a bigger section for rehearsals?
Yeah.
Around having people who always sit at the back, especially in a bigger orchestra, of course.
Yeah.
Sitting at the front, do you encourage that kind of thing, or is that cause more trouble than it?
No, I think it's fun. I think it's fun to see. It doesn't always work in professional orchestras because everyone has their job and they know what they do. But I think it is. I mean, I play in a chamber orchestra, and everyone has their seat and their role and everything like that. But we do often do things as a section that invite maybe my number 4 to sit next to me, and for my number 2 to have a leading role doing something else and things like that. So I would say that it is good to have people mixed up and do things, because it makes people listen to things differently. It's nice to sit next to different people sometimes, and if you are a tutti player or you sit at the back or something like that, it is a challenge, and it is a completely different experience to have to sit at the front, I guess. But also the other thing is it's also good for principals to be able to page turn sometimes. It's a thing that sometimes they forget how to do, which
I've always found it interesting though, when I have gone and sat at the back, it's good to remind me how much you need from a principal, how physically, you're sitting at the front thinking, I'm giving my all, but actually that's very small when you're, especially if you're like 6 desks back.
Absolutely.
You need to give so much physically, don't you? And I think it's very easy to sort of to think you're giving more than you are.
Yeah, I mean, even gestures generally, I think you should always over gesture, and if it's too much, be told that it's too much, and then you can rein it in. You don't actually need to spoon feed sections all the time, but I think especially when you're sitting at the back, it's so much harder in so many ways than sitting at the front, because you're so much further away from the conductor and the other principals of different sections. You can't see so much. It's very limited, what the visual side of it. So yeah, you need a principal who can show physically what the integrity of the phrase is going to be, or suddenly if things don't quite add up in a concert, or things get out slightly, you have to have a principal who's going to be very forthright and know what they want and where to play, and to be able to demonstrate that to 12 other people behind you. So it's a hard role, but I think it is good for especially people at the front to go occasionally and see what it's like on the other side.
Yeah. I remember when I first sat at the front, and I felt I was very on the beat. I was, leading really well. And a leader said to me, she said, you do know, don't you, that you're playing ever so slightly behind? And I was thinking, 1, 2, 3, play. I was playing just a hair's breadth behind the whole time. Probably because I'd been a long time sitting rank and file, and that's what you do. You go with what you see. So you see it and you play. Whereas when you're leading, you kind of have to take your life in your own hands sometimes, don't you? And jump that bungee jump on your own.
Yeah, you have to really be ready to be ahead. And also there's a lot of anticipation in some orchestras that they play behind the beat, and or a beat, and conductors don't always they're hearing a sound from a whole orchestra rather than making a sound. And I think as a principal, you have to kind of preempt that sometimes, that the sound might not happen unless you play. So, and everyone can be waiting for a downbeat, and it doesn't always visually happen. So do it, and just do it. And yeah, I do get that about sometimes it seems like things are behind, and you think you're on the beat, and you're just not. But it's just being aware all the time. You can't switch off at all. You can't sit back in your seat. You have to be almost 2 steps ahead all the time. Whether you're looking at what's coming down on the page, or you're thinking, oh, how can I do that differently, or reacting to things that have happened already. Maybe someone hasn't had a couple of cups of coffee enough around you, and you need to make up for that sometimes. So
you do have to be prepared to be strong and wrong, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no shame in playing in the wrong place at all. So we've all done it. We really all have.
How old were you when you became principal of Northern Sinfonia? Royal Northern Sinfonia.
Royal Northern Sinfonia. I got the job when I was 24, and I was 24, about 24 or 25, and I'd done my audition while I was still a student at the academy, and I had absolutely no idea what on earth I was getting myself into at all. In fact, I'd applied for this job, and I'd never applied for a job before, and a colleague of mine, in fact, was it a teacher, said, well, you probably should do another audition before you do a principal's audition because they're very different. So I applied for a tutti job in another orchestra, and that was 2 days before I did my Northern Symphonia audition. And if I hadn't have done that, I would have had a big shock because you can never, your first audition is always really hard. You just have to dive in feet first and just, you've got no idea what it's going to be like until you've done it.
I'm curious, did you get the rank and file trial? Because to me, you're such a wonderful principal player. Like, having you behind me would be quite difficult, Louisa. You know, I'd be sort of thinking, am I living up to the job? I mean, in my mind, somebody like you is very much a principal player, and I can't imagine you as a rank and file. Some people I think can you know, that you think, oh, they could be either. But did you get the trial for rank and file?
I did get a trial for rank and file, and believe it or not, I might have even been offered a job. But I got my Sinfonia job by then, so but it was fantastic, amazing experience. But I was lucky; I'd done a lot of freelancing while I was a student in London, so I kind of knew what was going on in a section.
Had you freelanced as a principal?
I had never sat principal in a professional orchestra. But actually it was quite funny because I did my Sinfonia audition, and it just happened that a patch of work came up with them almost a month after I'd done my audition. They just had a gap. So I went and I played the Haydn Creation, and to this day I probably could play it all from memory. I learnt it inside out. It completely wrote off my Christmas and New Year, and and that was my first experience. And then actually after that, while I was still on trial, I was on trial for about maybe 8 or 9 months with Sinfonia before I got the job. But I'd done another audition for another orchestra by then for another principal job, so I was doing both in tandem and got kind of invaluable experience from doing a trial for a symphony orchestra as well as a chamber orchestra, because it's very different. And I learnt a lot very, very quickly. You just have to be like an absorbent sponge and just take it all in, because if you haven't sat as a principal in a professional orchestra before, it's a very big learning curve, even though you may have sat and done numerous concerts at the back of a big London orchestra, but doesn't mean it's nothing comparatively at all.
We've had a question come in actually saying, which was harder, learning to be a principal musically or socially?
I was really young as when I got my job, I think, and musically, I think maybe my section will differ with these if they ever heard these answers. But I obviously, every time I opened the music every single week when I first joined my orchestra, the music was new. 9 times out of 10, I had never played it before. And we're talking things like Eroica Symphony and Beethoven 5. I hadn't played them. And because I'm too busy sitting at the back of a big symphony orchestra, loving playing things like, I don't know, big Mahler symphonies and things like that. And you just think, wow, the earth is ending. I can't believe it. But musically, it's very difficult because you have to, and I don't know if it's different in a chamber orchestra and a symphony orchestra, but in a chamber orchestra, it's kind of, you really do have to path a way and pave it yourself, because the opportunity is there, because everything can be heard a lot more easily, I guess. Yeah. But socially, it was difficult because I was young and we went on these big tours, and I mean, you spend 3 weeks away with 38 people you don't really know, and you're the youngest person and everyone kind of wants to look after you, which is very sweet, but you're trying to prove yourself as a principal and things like that. But no, I mean,
what about that thing in rehearsals where you turn around and say, so we're going to do this bowing here? Did I've had it countless times, people go, oh. Really? Why that bowing? How did you deal with things like that when you were 24? You know, probably at least 10 years younger than everybody else there. They knew you didn't know the music. Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
you've not performed it before.
Yeah.
And how did you cope with that kind of eye rolling? I find that very difficult to.
I think it's that decision where before you decide that you're going to tell something to the section, you often know exactly what you're going to say, so you don't make an idiot of yourself. You've decided that the wording of it and everything. Sometimes it's spontaneous, but when you're 24, it's not always very spontaneous. I can say that for sure. But there was one occasion when I think I asked to change a bowing in a very, very famous Haydn symphony, and I asked a colleague of mine if we could change this bowing.
Oh, so another
And
section principal, you mean?
another colleague, I'll say, I'll be careful.
So
And I thought, well, I want to do this bowing. Why can't I do this bowing? And my colleague looked at me and he just said, it's worked this way for the last 20 years. And I just thought, oh no, am I in trouble? But you know, sometimes there are reasons why some things work, and I understand that now. When you can't always think that your idea is the best one, or you are right all the time. That you have to have a lot of give and take. And this is this thing about playing in an orchestra, that you are always at the mercy of someone else, no matter who you are. The conductor is at the mercy of the orchestra. We, as orchestral musicians, have to do what the conductor wants. Yet there is always give and take. So you can't always think you're right.
It's interesting though when you said that you asked your colleagues. I immediately thought you were talking about another principal player, because I would, and maybe this is my fault, I would never ask my section, can I change?
I did ask another principal.
Oh, you did ask another principal. Oh, fine, okay, yes. Because I was going to say that's a pitfall I came to the very beginning. You know, does anyone mind if I change this bowing? Which of course, because there's so many people there, it opens a big debate, and you've got time. Much as you would love to discuss the pros and cons of, you know, Ricochet or whatever. As a principal, you kind of sometimes just have to say, I'm changing that. But I see you were talking to another principal. That's different. In fact, one of our polling questions was, what is your most important job as a principal? And I agree with this, actually. Most people have said making sure your section is happy and able to play their, oh, and it's cut it off then. Yes, but able to play their best. The other two questions were inspiring your section with your playing and working with other section leaders for a productive rehearsal. And I have to say, although I agree making sure your section is happy, all three of those are equal for me. I
mean, making sure your section is happy is the first thing that happens when they walk in the door in the morning. You want to greet them. You want everyone to be in a good mood before you even start playing music, which is the reason why you're there. But I think making sure that the section is organised, that you are doing your best as a team, and making sure that you can do your best to play with the other principals and make sure your section, everyone is working towards the same goal. Maybe does that kind of work in that?
I find it very difficult. So basically having three eyes. One being behind my head, checking that everyone's okay there, but then also trying to deal with all the other principals and making sure your section's represented in the grand scheme of things. Especially, I'm a principal second violin normally, and that's quite hard. You know, you tend to get a bit squashed down if you're not careful. And then, of course, the conductor in your face going, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? I find it overwhelming at times. And I remember before I was a principal having no idea that
that was going on in front of you. No. But I think you have to be really good at multitasking. You have to be able to you have to be deciding about bowings, probably conversing with a conductor, and having questions piling in from behind you or wherever. And if you can't multitask, then, I mean, we're not talking about like driving and putting on eyeliner. It's not like that. It's important things that you have to be able to listen and use your brain in different ways. And it's not always the hardest thing about sitting where we sit isn't always about the playing. Yeah, you have to be able to absolutely knock out solos that are going to bang on the first time, but actually that's not always the most important thing. It's being able to converse with people well and be able to put your point of view across in usually the least amount of words. I've learnt this now. Don't be flowery with language. Don't try and keep people happy. Just keep it simple and to the point and direct, and the information that people can absorb very easily.
I'll never forget Gordon Nikolic, who leads the LSO. When he first came to LSO, he spoke almost no English at all. And
Right.
it was his most productive time with the orchestra, in my opinion. He would turn around to the first violins and he would go, like that.
Great.
That's all he did.
And it worked.
Brilliant. Because really, I think more than anything else, it switched everyone's ears on to listening to the best sound they were making, which, play nicely, which is, what a lot of people say, he just said play nicely. But it's a fair point that usually it's just saying, even particularly when you're that far back, try and stay with us, because it's much easier to be at the front and being sensitive to what's going on around of you. And so very difficult from behind, isn't it? I was thinking, Pam, who sent in the question earlier on about the problems she was having leading her orchestra. Pam, I'm interested, how do you get on with your front desks and your principal winds? Do you have trouble there? Perhaps you could write in and tell us on this, on the Zoom window, if you have a chance. In the meantime, Louisa is off to Oslo tomorrow.
Flying out tomorrow.
Tell me, how is it going into an orchestra where not only do you not know anybody, but also you don't know the language?
Really don't know the language. I'm trying. It's always a great honour when you're asked to go and do, if you're going to ask to go into another orchestra, wherever it is. And I've guested a lot in the UK, but the small lake that is, or even a pond, which is the music world in the UK, everyone knows everybody, and 9 times out of 10 you will know people in the orchestra, and you've probably played with a few of them before. But I went out, you go out to a different country and you really don't know other people, and you have to, sometimes it's very easy to find a musical way forward, but that's all it is just about the music. And you turn up and you don't know anyone, you don't know where you are, you've probably never been to the city. Sometimes you may have been on a tour, you may have seen the inside of the concert hall in a hotel, but you don't know what the resident orchestra plays like even. And I don't know, whenever I go and guest not in this country, I will of course have looked up the orchestra, I'd have watched them play, hopefully on YouTube, or find some recordings, find a bit out about the conductor if you've not worked with them at all, and then really hope that your desk partner speaks English. It also is the big thing that you really do you do cross your fingers for that. But very lucky in Scandinavia that they all do probably speak better English than we do, or have a greater understanding of it. Sorry?
It's a grammar, I'm sure.
Oh, fantastic grammar. No, it's great, and it's a different way of working. Your continental orchestras do work differently. And actually, last week I was on tour on the continent, and I went and watched a Berlin Phil rehearsal before they came over to London to do their Sibelius cycle, and I also went to see the Gewandhaus, Leipzig Gewandhaus, playing in Luxembourg. And I watched just a normal rehearsal in Berlin, and you're kind of sitting there thinking, oh, I'm watching the Berlin Phil, this is great. And they have the same things that every other orchestra does, and it's not always perfect the first time, and it's just a very different experience. But it's and the same with the Gewandhaus, they're just normal people. You put these massive orchestras on pedestals, and you just think, actually, they are great, but they're the same as us.
Yeah.
So, well, in my opinion.
But there is that thing, isn't there? I mean, for instance, I played with LSO for a long time, and then I remember going to play with a different orchestra and playing, because I'd been there 10 years with LSO. everybody's absolutely on the beat. You know, there's no prisoners taken. I love it. It's great. But I came to this other orchestra where it was a much more of a bloom on the sound, which is a beautiful thing. But people weren't like that. They didn't have the entire section playing absolutely at the same time, and it was just terrifying because I was sitting at the back. I'd come out of LSO for a couple of weeks off, and I just went into the back of another orchestra, joined in, played rank and file, and I came smack in, you know, like this. And I remember Shostakovich 15 it was, and I remember everybody around me going, "Oh, it was terrible." And I suppose as a principal player, if you go in somewhere else, you have to be forthright. You have to be showing them, this is me. You've booked me as a principal. This is the way I play.
They want to see
you in the same way that you should at the back of an orchestra, maybe.
But you have to just be so aware.
Yeah.
So aware. Just instant switch on brain. And these orchestras just don't take passengers. You have to be right there.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure about something, whether it's where to play or what to do, the time it takes to even think about it, you've missed it.
Yeah.
So, but you have to be very aware of how different orchestras play, and because every orchestra has their own kind of unique little stamp of way of playing, and sometimes it doesn't work, and you go into places and you know very quickly that you are not in the right place, or as in environment for you.
Yeah.
But that's okay. It's okay. It's just as much about me going somewhere as to other people watching what I do. So if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you've probably still done a couple of really great concerts, and you've had a musical experience, and you may have played something you've never played before. All these things, there are lots of different things. It doesn't matter if it doesn't go well. So hope it does though.
Absolutely. Pam has asked us, she says, she's talking about her orchestra that she leads, and she says the principal winds seem somehow more aware usually of what else is going on. She thinks the problem they really have is a couple of string section leaders who I think used to be rank and file players and are new to a principal role and not so confident in it. So somehow Pam is going to have to try and give confidence to those people, isn't she, somehow? Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the idea that you had when playing chamber music with people is a really good one, because everyone has an individual role. If you don't play, no music happens. So it's good. That gives people confidence and often brings people out of their shell. But regarding within the orchestra and sections and things like that, I think often just smiling at someone before they have to do a solo, or don't stare at them before they have to do a solo, or maybe even if you don't agree with something they're saying, agree with them sometimes. It gives them confidence. And you might not like a bowing that, like when I've worked with you, obviously we get on very well, it's very easy. But if you thought that I wasn't feeling so confident about doing a big solo in something, you'd probably just smile at me and give a bit more. Yeah. And it gives you confidence. It would give me confidence to see you being there for me. And we've all been in that situation where you don't always feel so confident, but whatever happens, you still have to play it. So I think, but with Pam's orchestra, it might be that you just encourage people by actually, like you would if you're in a meeting or a conversation, you engage with eye contact, you show enthusiasm in the way you speak to someone or things like that. Just put it across in your playing. It's exactly the same. So
we've got a slightly controversial question on the polling. Should a principal be paid considerably more than a tutti player? And one answer is absolutely. The second answer is only a little bit more, because they're playing the same music after all, particularly in a string section. And the third question is no. We've had some answers came in before, and we've got about sort of 50-50 between absolutely yes, they should be paid more, and the second answer, which is only a little bit more. What's your views on that controversy?
My views on whether principals should be paid more. I think if you had if you had me sitting here next to a tutti player, our views would differ slightly. Also, very controversial subject. Never bring it up in the coffee room.
No, you're
Never.
right.
No. And also never moan about it in public. I think what we do sitting in our seats, say a program came up as a principal cello, and you've got Creatures of Prometheus Overture, followed by Brahms' Second Piano Concerto, followed by Interval, Shostakovich 15th Symphony, and you've got like the 3 pivotal cello solos in the symphonic repertoire, different in a chamber orchestra. But I've put a slightly different program together for that. But what we put ourselves through in terms of the notes we have to play, playing in front of 80 people in a symphony orchestra, playing on your own is nerve-wracking. I don't reckon there's anybody, no matter how confident you are, who can say they've never had a stomach flutter at any point, or you think, oh, you don't question yourself yet, even if you're whoever. I'm sure there are moments at some point where you've had some kind of that situation.
It's not just about the solos, though, is it?
It's abstract, and I'm just saying as a musical term, what we do, we have to, the number of emails I have, because I'm a principal, from the management, from the other section leaders, discussing auditions, sorting out bowings prior to the rehearsal, having meetings about personnel, organising who plays what if there's divided sections, organising meetings and having the meetings, discussing things in all your breaks. And then your email inbox fills up as well, just to show you've done all these things. And then there is the talking to the conductor, making sure you're saying the right things, not conversing with the other principals, and making sure that the section feels like they've had a voice. Because sometimes you can sit there and you're being bombarded with questions. What bowing's this? Is this right? Is this note right? Are we playing that as a diminuendo? It's constant all the time, the questions. So you have to be able to filter things and filter them very quickly and deal with them. So I value the tutti players in my section just so much. They are incredible, and they know what to ask and when to ask it, and they will always give everything where they're playing. But it's a different role, and there are different things that my section behind me will do that I don't do, because I'm having to have 6 arms sometimes. But I do think, principal players, there is a reason why they are paid more, and sometimes it's behind closed doors that you can't see why they are. Because we may go 3 weeks in a row where I don't have to play any solos, but I've had to make up for it in working with maybe a difficult conductor, or having to have a trialist on in an orchestra. That's always a decision that I have to make. Like, if it was in my section or a related section, you have to talk about these things, and the tutti players aren't always having to do all of these things. So principals are paid more for a reason.
Our third polling question was, would you like to be a principal player? And we've again got 50-50 on this one, with people saying yes, they only want to be a principal, and the other one being it depends on who is in the section. And I have to say, I fall into the latter category. I'm quite happy to be in the section if I respect the people at the front. I'm very happy. I love playing an LSO and being part of that. I didn't really care where I was sitting. In fact, I enjoyed it more sitting at the back and not having that stress. However, having now sat at the front a lot, I find it very difficult to sit at the back. It's so much harder.
You've made that transition professionally, and I think that's really interesting. I think that it does make a difference if you've got a nice section, and I'm lucky that I've actually appointed within my section as well. So I feel that I've got a really good team, but I think it does make a difference when you've got a nice section, especially when you're guesting. Actually, because it can make all the difference of whether you spend your 20-minute tea break standing on your own, just going, oh, look, I feel great. Or if you're sitting being included in something, because people are interested in you, not just your playing. And you can have a CV that's as long as your arm, and you can have done everything, but it's about who you are as well.
But would you now be happy to sit rank and file, or now that you've had that luxury in some ways, as we've discussed, of sitting at the front, the ease of sitting at the front visually and orally,
Yeah.
would you be prepared to go back, or?
I don't know whether I think it's a very different way of actually playing. At the front, you make the sound. In a chamber orchestra, especially, I direct the sound, and I'm lucky I've got a really nice cello as well, so it makes a lot of noise. But in a section, you have to blend a lot more with your sound, and I'm probably drastically out of practice at doing that, although it would be quite nice sometimes. And I do sit there sometimes, and you maybe you're having a really difficult rehearsal and things are just not working, or you've got a massive solo, or you've got to go to a meeting for 2 hours in your break or something like that. And I often do think, oh, I'd really like it if I could have an easy day and sit at the back. But it's not an easy day because their job is so much harder because they can't see or hear anything. So it's a hard game. It's a hard toss up. So
I also now don't know, although I'd be quite happy to go and sit rank and file, I don't know if everybody else would be.
I don't think anyone would want me to sit next to them because I can't page turn.
Well, there is that as well, but I find that my style of playing has changed now that I...
Absolutely. And also, I would be this backseat driver. I'd be asking questions. I'd be probably having a small tantrum if I didn't get my own way. I'd be saying, well, why are we doing this?
Never have you in my section.
No, I wouldn't. No, absolutely. You wouldn't want me.
Just before we wind things up, I wondered if you could just tell us a bit as well about the other stuff you do in your career. You're principal in all sorts of places, but you do some very interesting chamber music as well. And we were talking earlier on about the value of that, helping you become principal. You play with Catherine Tickell a lot, don't you?
Yeah, Catherine Tickell is a Northumbrian folk artist, and she plays the Northumbrian pipes and fiddle, and she is probably one of the most famous folk musicians around, and she's super famous. But on top of that, she is a fantastic composer, arranger. She's a professor at Newcastle University. She's written for London Sinfonietta, Britten Sinfonia, National Youth Orchestra. She's proper. Anyway, she set up this group called Catherine Tickell and the Side, and I play in that, and it consists of Catherine, a folk accordionist who also does clog dancing, a Celtic harp player who was classically trained but has got a huge understanding of folk music, but she's like a contemporary harp player as well, so she does all sorts of cross collaborations with modern composers like Graham Fitkin and people like that. And then there's me. So
in that, then I can't imagine how you can fit in. Well, started with the clog dancing, but how does piano fit in that?
Well, when Catherine first asked me to do it, I think she saw me playing in an orchestra and she thought, I want to play with her. That's what I like, her sound, I like her attitude. She didn't know me that well then, and no, it's an interesting cross collaboration. And I hate the word fusion, and it's not a fusion. It's 4 musicians who are coming together to play music that they love and bring different aspects to it. Because I don't even know what the word folk cello means. I don't think I even know. I've never seen one or heard one. Not through lack of trying, actually. It's quite hard. But I play the cello in a folk group, but I'm still practicing hours a day to be able to play all these things with them as well. It's hard.
They're doing a lot of improvisation when they play, though, aren't they?
It's not so much. Actually, I thought that when I first turned up in this first rehearsal with Catherine Tickell, I was like, oh, it's so easy. So you just make it all up then. Little did I know. And it's very organised. I basically play the same thing as do they. It's very organised, structured music, which I didn't ever think it was. Yes, there's harmonisation and these twiddly ornament things that I can't quite get my head around, but I have a go. It's a different sound world, and it's very liberating. And I feel like I can play differently and give something very different to how I could if I was playing Beethoven 5 or Mozart 41.
And you've also played with groups like the Nash Ensemble.
Yeah, that very different type of chamber music playing. Very high-end spectrum of musicianship and playing, and I have to be at the top of my game. They are amazing minds as well as brilliant musicians. So that's really fun though. Limited rehearsal, a lot of musical, you get a lot out of it. So
how do the rehearsals pan out for things like that then? Are they led by one particular person because of the
no, everyone really. Well, it kind of will depend whether it's a repeat program if you've had the same personnel playing stuff, but they kind of eat repertoire, a group like that, and they can just, even if they've never seen it before or never played it before, they know that what they're playing is right and that their musical personality can come through whether they know the piece or not. But again, with something like that, I do turn up and I will try and know it inside out. So
do you have the courage to say your bit, or because you're not a member, do you feel slightly sort of I'll keep a low profile, head below them?
well, that's that hard thing, isn't it? And it's like that when you go and guest in an orchestra as well. Do I keep quiet and seem like I don't know really, or I'm very happy to go along with things, or I haven't got a personality, or do I show myself and risk that? But I think you just find a happy medium. And yeah, I was like 22 when I went into the Nash Ensemble, so they've known me since I was a kid. And the previous cellist used to be my teacher, so I feel like they know me well now. So, and they've kind of seen me grow up and my career's got better, and things have been going well. So they're okay with me speaking now. So
they love you, warts and all. I don't blame. Louisa, it's absolutely wonderful talking to you today. Thank you so much, and thanks for sending questions in. Really appreciate it. We're going to put this webinar up on our YouTube channel for anybody that wants to watch it again. And also, if you go to our website, musicalorbit.com, you have the option to learn a lesson online with Louisa and any other of our professional players if you want to. So thank you very much, everybody. I'll see you again soon.